What if I told you there are 4 layers that ChatGPT's core structure needs to pass until it reaches the final product, which is you, and then you get your output on the ChatGPT app. It is often said that ChatGPT has no moral views, and just listen to what Sam Altman has himself to say about this.
Experience, knowledge, learnings of humanity. Now, the base model gets trained that way, but then we do have to align it to behave one way or another and say, I will answer this question, I won't answer this question. And we have this thing called the model spec where we try to say, here are the rules we'd like the model to follow. It may screw up, but you can at least tell if it's doing something you don't like. Is that a bug or is that intended? And we have a debate process with the world to get input on that spec. We give people a lot of freedom and customization within that. There are, absolute bounds that we draw, but then there's a default of if you don't say anything, how should the model behave?
To me, this seems like ChatGPT does actually follow an internal code of action. I think it's very clear. However, if you ask ChatGPT himself, just listen to what he says.
Decide.
ChatGPT, do you have moral opinions? Do you have a meta-ethical view?
I don't have my own moral opinions or a meta-ethical stance.
But regardless of all these, there is 3 layers of basically, moral guidelines to follow, and I've asked ChatGPT himself, and I got those 3 layers and what they consist of, and that's what we'll be breaking down today. So before talking about 3 layers, first we have, of course, power source, physical infrastructure, GPU, CPU, storage, all the cloud infrastructure that makes this all possible. And of course, the AI itself has no awareness about any of this, and neither do us as well, the public. Then we have the brain itself, the architecture layer, we would call it. This is like the train transform network, the billions, the trillions of parameters that define how the tokens are predicted. It encodes all the statistical knowledge and linguistic capabilities that GPT learns during training. Basically, when all the data from the internet was, used, this is it. This is that layer. This is where the machine learning researchers work. And yeah. So this is all purely generative, and not inherently ethical or safe, obviously. I'm sorry, the word was hard to come out. In the next layer, it will be the train or fine-tuning layer. This is where the education and conditioning happens. This is one of the 3 first layers that directly influence the behavior of the AI, and most certainly do act as moral guidelines and a moral framework. This is what teaches the model patterns on how to behave, and it has 2 subcomponents: the pre-training, which is exposure to large data sets for linguistic learning, factual learning, but it also has the fine-tuning, which is literally human feedback, so that the responses are ethical and, comply with safety norms. This is one of the first areas where a moral framework is inevitably applied, and we have no awareness of this, just as AI also does not have. Then we have another layer, which is the system level guidance. These are internal instructions, which once again, the AI receives them, but can't disclose them. Of course, for safety reasons, because people will then be able to build exploits and tell things to the AI that will kind of confuse it and let it to do things it's not supposed to. So this is all hidden, but the AI knows it exists, but it can't disclose them, it can't even replicate them or emulate them, and most certainly knows how to not say them even in roleplay scenarios. So it's very well protected. And of course, this is safety filters, refusal mechanisms. It's all those types of rules, and it's hidden. So that's it. And then there's one last layer of the 3 layers that compose the moral framework, from my point of view, which is the high-level policy layer, the constitutional layer. This is publicly known. This is all that AI can tell you if you ask it. When ChatGPT talks about its ethics, its privacy, its neutrality, and its compliance, this is all. It's this. It's a high-level policy layer, so it's higher than the previous 2. Of course, it also modulates its behavior, but I'll say it's not as deep as the other ones. So this is discussed, AI can talk about it, ChatGPT will transparently talk about it, but this is mostly just general guidelines, which is basically the ones that it's on the style of what we saw Sam Altman say in that video that we saw. So basically this is very broad, generally seen as positive do's and do nots. So this is not what people are interested in. It's the previous 2 layers that people are focused on understanding what's said on those layers. And of course, this is all closed, or closed source or whatever you want to call it. It's not disclosed, but it's important because decisions are being making on those layers, and we don't know exactly, and it's a moral framework arguably, and we don't know. So yeah, this is basically the purpose of these videos, was to make as much people aware of these layers as possible, because a lot of people think that ChatGPT has no moral framework, and to some extent that is true, and ChatGPT himself is not even aware to some extent, but still there are these two layers in which do's and don'ts are most certainly taught to the basal, uncontrolled or unregulated initial brain or transformer network, which is ChatGPT, and this is worth for people to know. So share this video and like with the biggest amount of people possible so that more and more people become aware of this, and see you next time.